He was supposed to build her dreams, not break them. Before the tabloids, before the billion-dollar empire, before the woman in red, there was just Cale Astor and Anera Hale, two people on a leaky rooftop, looking up at a skyline that hadn't yet bowed to his name. This isn't the story of a betrayal that came out of nowhere. It's the story of a man who forgot who built him, and the woman who walked away, not to hurt him, but to remember herself. Welcome back to Mr. Charles Stories, where every story comes with a moral worth remembering. If you believe peace is worth more than diamonds, this one's for you. Hit that subscribe button, because sometimes walking away is the beginning of everything. Long before he was a billionaire, Cale Astor was just a man with dusty shoes and blueprints rolled under his arm. He worked for a second-rate architecture firm in Manhattan, barely made rent, but he had vision. His fingers were always ink-stained, his eyes always tired. But his voice? When he spoke about buildings, it came alive. And there was only one person who truly listened, Anera Hale. She wasn't in real estate. She wasn't in finance. She didn't chase success. She taught art at a small community center on the Lower East Side. Her days were full of kids who smeared paint everywhere and called it joy. Her nights were full of Cale. They met at a corner deli. He spilled coffee on her sketch pad. She didn't even flinch. "You gonna buy me a new one?" she asked calmly. "I'll design you one," he said with a nervous laugh. He actually meant it. That was the thing about Cale. He dreamed big, but back then, he also followed through. Their first date was a walk through Brooklyn Bridge Park. Their second was a rooftop picnic with dollar pizza. By the third, Anera already knew. She would never be bored with him. Tired, maybe. Frustrated, absolutely. But never bored. Cale was fire. Anera was calm water. Together, they made something steady. They married in a city hall office with bad lighting and a shaky camera phone video. No guests, no champagne, no gowns. But the vows were clear. "I'll build our world," he said. "And I'll fill it with warmth," she promised. Their first apartment had peeling wallpaper and a neighbor who blasted polka at 2 a.m., but they didn't care. They painted over the mess, hung her art next to his sketches, ate ramen on the floor, and every night they dreamed. She wanted a gallery one day. He promised her a glass building on Fifth Avenue with her name etched into steel. They believed each other. Cale's first high-rise approval came on a rainy Tuesday. He called her, breathless, soaked from head to toe. "I did it," he said. They signed, 15 floors. "My design." Anera smiled through the phone. "We're ordering steak tonight." From there, things moved fast. Suddenly, Cale had meetings with men in sharp suits. He started getting invited to events with open bars and silent auctions. The jeans turned to tailored pants. The rooftop beers turned into boardroom scotch. She stayed the same. She still painted, still taught, still came home early and waited for him at their table with 2 plates and a flickering candle. But most nights, he didn't make it. Running late, stuck in Jersey. Meeting went long. The warmth began to thin, like winter creeping into autumn. One night, Anera found a cufflink on the couch. It wasn't his. It had the initials NL. She held it between her fingers for a long time, then placed it in a drawer next to a dried rose Cale gave her on their first anniversary. He never asked about it. She never brought it up. She still hoped, still waited, because love makes you wait longer than logic ever would. While Cale chased towers and contracts, she stayed in her rhythm. The kids at her center still threw paint, still hugged her tightly, still begged her not to take days off. Her friends asked if Cale was okay. "He's just busy," she'd say. They never pushed, but they saw. She wore the same wedding band, but her eyes no longer smiled when she mentioned his name. On the surface, nothing had broken yet, but deep in the quiet corners of her heart, Anera was already packing. Not suitcases, just emotions, every missed dinner, every unanswered text. Every night she stared at her food growing cold while his name flashed with "read 9:42 p.m." and no reply. She knew. She just didn't want to say it aloud. Not yet. The first time Anera saw Niamh Lorne, she wore red. A dress too polished for a late-night work session. Lips too perfectly glossed. Laughter too relaxed for a woman who should have respected boundaries. Anera didn't knock. She had a key to his office. She had a right to be there. It was their anniversary. 5 years. She came with dinner in hand, the kind of thoughtful spread only someone who remembered his favorite childhood dishes could prepare. Smoked lamb, soft lentils, and a bottle of that rare wine he once said reminded him of Paris. But he wasn't alone. He stood near the window with a tumbler in hand. Niamh sat comfortably on the leather couch, one heel dangling off her toe like she belonged there. Cale didn't flinch. "You weren't supposed to come here tonight," he said. That was it. No greeting, no surprise, no apology. Anera blinked once, then looked at the untouched wine glasses on the side table. 2. Her fingers didn't tremble. Her voice didn't crack. "I thought we were having dinner." Niamh straightened, smoothing her skirt. She didn't speak, didn't introduce herself. She didn't need to. "I'm in the middle of something," Cale said, already dismissing her with his eyes. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the way he looked through her, like she'd interrupted a meeting he'd long stopped inviting her to. Anera didn't argue. She didn't ask who Niamh was. She didn't beg for explanation. She left the food on the table and walked out the way she came. In the elevator, she didn't cry. Her reflection looked back at her, calm, cold, controlled. She got home before midnight. She didn't eat. She took a shower, lit a candle, and sketched in silence. It wasn't a picture of KL. It wasn't even a face. It was just a swirl of 2 circles drifting apart. 2 days passed. He came home late again. No call, no message. She was at the dining table, going through old art supplies. "I want to talk," he said. Anera set down the brush. Then, "Talk." He didn't sit. He poured himself a drink first, like the man she once knew was trying to steady his own nerves. "I'm not asking for a divorce." She tilted her head. "I want us to stay married. But I also want Niamh." She blinked, slowly. "You're serious?" "Yes." He said it like he was proposing a joint venture. "I think it's practical. You've always hated the public attention. Niamh. She understands that side of my world. But you're my foundation. You're the one who made me. Why should we throw it all away when we can just evolve?" "Evolve," she repeated. "You'd have your own space, the art studio, the gallery. I'll support all of it. And in public." He didn't answer. The silence was louder than anything he could have said. "You want 2 women." He nodded. She didn't scream. She didn't laugh. She didn't argue. She stood, walked to the kitchen, and made tea. He waited, like he expected her to accept the terms, like he thought his love was enough of a currency to make betrayal negotiable. That night, Anera slept in her art room. Door closed, candle burning, sketches sprawled on the floor. He never knocked. By morning, she was gone. She took 3 suitcases. Nothing more. No jewelry, no designer bags, no account numbers. She didn't touch the money in their joint accounts. She didn't leave a note. She didn't slam doors. She left behind a single canvas on the living room floor. That same abstract swirl, 2 circles drifting apart. She turned off her phone for the next 3 days. The silence was her decision speaking for itself. Cale didn't chase her. At least, not openly. He had interviews to attend, deals to close, events to show up for. With Niamh, the media made their own assumptions. Cale Astor's new flame, they said. Is this the reason for Anera's disappearance? Anera didn't respond. She never gave the press a word. She rented a small 1-bedroom in Brooklyn above a bookstore. The apartment had creaky floors and too much sunlight, but it was hers. She painted again. Not for galleries, not for show, just for breath. She returned to her old community center. The same kids hugged her like she never left. She opened the windows wider during art class. She let the paint drip. She let her smile come back in pieces. No one asked where her husband was. If they wondered, they didn't say. One afternoon, she updated her online gallery, quietly. No PR push, no grand return, just new pieces. One of them was titled, Enough. It sold in under 4 hours. Then came another commission, then 10 more. Then a journalist from a small cultural magazine reached out. I wrote about your gallery. It's going viral. People want to know your story. She read the article headline 3 times. The billionaire's wife who walked. She didn't feel powerful. She didn't feel vengeful. She just felt free. Back in Manhattan, Cale read the article in silence. He was in his penthouse. Neve was out of town. The journalist didn't quote Anera. She hadn't spoken to anyone. But the article told the truth. A woman who left quietly. A woman who didn't sell her pain. A woman who simply reclaimed herself. That night, Cale didn't drink. He walked into his study, looked at the canvas Anera left behind, and stared. He finally understood it. Not art, loss. 1 week later, Anera received a handwritten note. No signature, just a quote on the inside. You gave me everything before I became someone. I never earned what I became without you. She folded it once, placed it in her drawer, next to the cufflink, next to the dried rose, but she didn't reply. She was done writing chapters in his story. She was finally writing her own. She didn't walk away to make a point. She walked away because she was no longer a choice. She was her own answer. If this story touched you, pause for a second. Have you ever watched love turn into distance without a warning? Have you ever stayed quiet to keep peace? Have you ever chosen dignity over comfort? If any part of this feels close to your heart, tap the like button. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters. And subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories, because some stories help you choose yourself. The city didn't feel like it used to. Manhattan, once filled with possibility, had started to feel unfamiliar to Anera. Like a friend who changed their tone mid-conversation. She still took the train from Brooklyn sometimes, still passed their old Thai spot on. East Houston still walked past the skyscraper Cale once said would bear his name. Now it did. Astor in bold, gleaming silver on glass that cut the sky. But what it didn't reflect anymore was her. Their 5th anniversary fell on a Thursday. She remembered because their first anniversary fell on a Thursday too. She'd painted his initials onto a ceramic mug, and he'd baked her a strawberry tart from scratch. It collapsed in the middle, and they ate it anyway, laughing. 5 years later, she wasn't sure what to expect, but she wanted to try. She cooked all day. Smoked lamb, his mother's recipe, lentils with cinnamon bark. She opened a bottle of red they'd saved from their trip to Italy and packed it all, neatly into a basket, the kind she used to carry when they'd picnic on the rooftop. He hadn't called all day. That was normal now. She assumed he was working late, or he forgot the date, or maybe both. Still, something in her refused to let go of the tradition. Maybe love wasn't always about feeling seen. Maybe sometimes it was just about showing up anyway. So she did. She took a car to his office. Security didn't stop her. They all knew her face. The quiet woman who never caused scenes. The one who always smiled and said thank you. Up on the 42nd floor, the light in his office was still on. She didn't knock. She had her own key. She used it. The door opened with a soft click, and there she was, Neve Lorne, perched on the edge of the couch like it was her living room, wearing a red dress too fitted for business, laughing too easily, her voice like syrup across the room. Cale stood with his back to the window, a drink in one hand, his jacket off, tie loosened. He didn't look surprised, not even a little. Anera stepped in, the basket still in her hand. No words, no smile, no warmth in his face. You weren't supposed to come here tonight, he said. That was all. Not happy anniversary, not I'm sorry. Just that. You weren't supposed to come here tonight. She looked at Neve. Neve didn't flinch. She smirked softly, as if she knew she didn't have to say anything, as if she'd already won. Anera placed the basket on the nearest desk. The wine tilted inside, but she steadied it. Her voice didn't shake. "I brought dinner." Cale looked down at his glass, then up at the ceiling, then back at her. "I'm in the middle of something." Niamh crossed her legs slowly. She didn't say a word. Anera didn't stay to watch them exchange glances. She turned, walked back out. The door clicked behind her, just as softly as it opened. She didn't cry in the elevator, didn't scream in the car, didn't throw the basket across the room when she got home. She unpacked it quietly, set the food on the counter, uncorked the wine and poured a glass for one. Then she sat and stared at nothing. That night, she didn't sleep in their bed. She slept in the art room, curled up on the floor beside unfinished canvases. She lit one candle, then painted for hours in the dark, using only the glow of the streetlight and her memory. The strokes were heavier than usual, less delicate. Not rage, not sorrow, something else. She couldn't name it. By morning, Cale still hadn't texted. At noon, she sent him one word. "Are you okay?" He replied hours later. "We need to talk." They didn't talk that night. He came in after midnight, went straight to the guest room, didn't stop to explain. By the second night, she was done waiting. When he walked in, she was already at the dining table, sketchbook in hand. "I'm not asking for a divorce," he said before sitting. "I didn't ask for one," she replied. "I'm trying to be honest." She looked up. "Then say what you need to say." He took a deep breath. "I want to stay married, but I also want Niamh." The air went still. Anera didn't blink. "You want both?" "Yes." He said it like it was reasonable, like he was asking for space in the closet, not someone's dignity. "I love you," he added quickly. "You're still everything to me, but..." She understands the world I'm in now, the expectations, the deals, the image. You've always preferred quiet things, art, simplicity. She knows how to play the game. She stared at him. "And you think I should stay?" "I'll support you completely. The gallery, the foundation you talked about, all of it. You'll have your space, and I'll have mine." She stood, walked to the kitchen, made tea. He didn't move. She placed the mug in front of herself, sat down, and said nothing. Cale sat across from her, confused. "I'm not saying this to hurt you," he said. She sipped. "No, you're saying it because you believe it." He paused. "Don't you want to keep what we've built?" She let the silence stretch. He didn't understand that she was already letting go. That love, once turned into a transaction, ceases to be love at all. That night, she packed, not frantically, not with tears. She folded each blouse carefully, wrapped her paintbrushes in linen, zipped 3 suitcases and left the jewelry. She took no account numbers, no alimony, no cards. The only thing she left behind was a canvas, a swirl of 2 circles, one shrinking, the other floating away. She moved into a walk-up in Brooklyn. The floors creaked and the heater knocked every few hours, but it felt honest. She spent her first morning there opening windows, letting the city back in. She painted that day. A small abstract called Betrayal Doesn't Always Scream. She posted it to her online gallery. It sold within an hour. She didn't smile, but she didn't cry either. Somewhere in between was a new kind of peace, one she hadn't felt in years. On the 3rd morning, she received a message from her former student, a 17-year-old who'd once told Anera that art class made her feel less alone in the world. The message read, "I heard what happened. You don't owe anyone your story, but thank you for leaving with grace." That taught me more than any headline could. Anera read it twice, then turned off her phone. She wasn't interested in revenge, only in remembering who she was before she was someone's wife, someone's shadow, someone's grounded balance. She was done balancing anyone. Now she would rise, on her own terms, quietly, and with dignity no one could ever ask her to share. The first thing she noticed when she walked into their penthouse the next morning was the silence. Not the usual city hush or the distant hum of traffic, it was a different kind. Still, sharp, final. She didn't expect him to be home, but he was. Cale stood by the glass wall, coffee in hand, suit jacket on but not buttoned. His eyes were on the skyline, not her. He hadn't slept. She could tell. "I was going to call," he said without turning. Anera dropped her keys on the counter. "You didn't." He faced her. "Because I didn't know what to say." She pulled her cardigan tighter. "You always know what to say, Cale. That's your gift." Silence stretched between them. She waited. He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "I want to keep our marriage, but I also want Neve." She didn't flinch. This time, she looked him in the eye. "You want 2 women. I want the truth. This works. You and I, we're history, foundation. But she's exposure, access, visibility, things that matter in the world I live in now. Things I don't provide." He hesitated. "That's not what I meant. But it's what you believe." "I'm being honest." "No, Cale. You're being convenient." He shook his head. "Why throw everything away? I'm not leaving you. I'm offering more." "You're offering betrayal and calling it expansion. You're overreacting." She stepped back, like his words physically hit her. "You think I should stay and let you split your life between 2 women, like it's business? I've built something incredible. I don't want to lose you, too." "You already did," she whispered. Still, she didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She walked to her art room and closed the door. Inside, she sat on the floor. She pulled out her brushes, her canvas, her past, and she painted. By sunrise, her decision was made. 3 suitcases, 1 coat, her portfolio. She didn't take the jewelry. She didn't need the black card. She didn't touch the trust fund he set up in her name. She didn't even take the car. On the kitchen counter, she left a single piece of canvas, 2 circles, 1 bold, 1 fading, neither touching. She called a cab, gave the driver an address in Brooklyn, a 1-bedroom above a used bookstore. It had peeling paint and uneven floors. The building didn't have an elevator. She carried her bags up the stairs herself. The apartment smelled like dust and ink. She opened the windows. The cold stung her cheeks. She welcomed it. She spent the first few hours unpacking. Then, she sat on the wooden floor, legs crossed, brush in hand. She painted silence, the kind that held space, not emptiness. Then, she cooked. For one, she played music on her old speaker. No lyrics, just cello and light. And she breathed. For the first time in years, she didn't wait for the front door to open. The online gallery she used had been dormant for months. She logged in, uploaded 1 painting, a table for 1. She didn't add a price. By nightfall, it sold for $1,200. The buyer left a note. "There's something so quiet about this, and yet I can't stop staring." "Thank you." She smiled, just a little. That night, she painted 2 more. Choice, absence. By the end of the week, they were both gone. So was her name. Now it was trending. Not in the tabloids, not in gossip columns. In forums, among women, among artists. The ones who said nothing, but watched everything. A journalist from a small art and culture magazine sent her an email. It simply said, "Would you ever talk about what it meant to walk away?" She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her work spoke for her. But they wrote the article anyway. The billionaire's wife who walked. Cale read the piece at 1 a.m. in his home office. Neve was asleep in the guest wing. The article didn't drag him. It didn't even name him. It praised Anera's grace, her restraint, her ability to vanish without bitterness, to rebuild without revenge. That, more than anything, stung. She didn't rage. She didn't fight. She simply left. And that made it impossible to call her irrational. It made him look worse than if she had screamed, because she didn't need to. She had said everything through silence. 2 days later, his assistant forwarded him a link. The painting Letting Go had sold for $7,500. It was featured on a major art blog. Another showed a commission Anera had made for a women's trauma center in Harlem, a mural called Reclaim. Cale stared at it longer than he should have. She hadn't just left. She had become something new. That night, Nave tried to make him laugh. She cooked. She asked about his next project. He nodded, smiled faintly, but he didn't touch his food. And at 3 a.m., he stood alone on the balcony of his penthouse, glass in hand, wind cutting his skin. He realized for the first time what he had truly lost. Not a wife, not a helper, not even a partner. He lost the only person who ever knew the man behind the empire. And now, she was no longer looking back. Anera didn't hear from him for 3 days. Not a call, not a message, not a knock on the door. But on the 4th day, he showed up at her new place. No driver, no assistant, no press, just Cale. He stood in the hallway like a man who didn't know how to ask to come inside. His suit was tailored, his hair perfect, but his shoulders looked heavier than she remembered. "You left," he said. She didn't answer. She stepped aside and let him in. The apartment was small. No chandelier, no private elevator, no panoramic view. Just warmth, plants on the sill, a canvas drying near the wall, a mug half full on the table. "This is where you live now?" he asked. She nodded. He walked slowly around the room, like he was afraid to touch anything, afraid it might make him real again. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "Good," she replied, pulling her cardigan tighter. "I'm not here to beg either. I didn't expect you to—" He looked at her then, really looked. "You look peaceful." "I am." That shook him more than any insult could have. He sat on the couch, the same one she'd found second-hand. She didn't offer him tea. She didn't sit beside him. She leaned against the wall and waited. "I've been thinking," he started, "about everything, about how we got here." She crossed her arms. "I know what I said sounded selfish." "It didn't sound selfish," she said. "It was selfish," he swallowed. "But I meant it honestly. That's what makes it worse, Cale." He hesitated. "I don't want to lose you. You already did. I want us to try something different, not end this. I can provide for you, support your work. You don't have to be part of the public side. That can stay separate." "Separate," she echoed. "Like me. You're not separate. You wanted me quiet and her loud, me grounded and her glamorous, me for home and her for photos." He opened his mouth but didn't speak. "You weren't offering me love. You were offering me a compartment." He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "It's not like that." "It is," she said softly. "And the worst part is, you thought I'd say yes. I thought we could evolve." "No," she said, voice still calm. "You thought I was too soft to leave." The words landed heavy. He looked at the floor. "I didn't think you'd leave without a word. I left with a canvas. That was my word." He chuckled once, bitterly. "You always were better at saying things without speaking. I had to be. You stopped listening." The silence filled the room like fog. He looked around again. "This place is small. It's enough. I can buy you something better. You can't buy me anymore." She said it without anger, just truth, and it pierced. He stood, pacing now. "So that's it? Years together and you're done?" "We weren't together for years," she said. "We were in the same house. But I was alone." Cale stopped pacing. "I still love you," he said. She nodded. "But you love yourself more." He stepped forward. "I want to fix this." "You can't fix something you chose to break." "I didn't break us. You brought someone else in." "That wasn't a crack. That was a decision." He looked desperate now. "You're painting again. You're making money. You have peace. Why can't we exist in parallel?" She tilted her head. "Because I'm not a second life. I'm a full one. You don't get to slice me in half just to make space for your ego." He closed his eyes like he was in pain. She softened slightly. Not for him, for herself. "I loved you, Cale," she said. "So much that I stayed when it stopped feeling like home. But I won't be an option. Not for you. Not for anyone." He opened his eyes. "So, This is goodbye. She looked at him, long and steady. No, this was goodbye the moment you asked me to share what was already mine. He didn't argue, didn't cry. He nodded, once, then turned, and walked to the door. He paused. I'll always wonder what would have happened if I hadn't said it. She said nothing. He waited. Still, nothing. He left. And this time, she didn't watch him go. Cale didn't call again. He sent no messages, no emails, no surprise flowers, no private investigator waiting in a parked car across the street. And Anera didn't wait. She wasn't keeping score. She wasn't measuring time since he left her apartment. She was simply breathing again. Her gallery sales grew slowly, then all at once. The pieces she thought were too raw, too abstract to explain, found homes in places she never imagined. A therapist in Boston requested 3 prints for a trauma recovery center. A boutique hotel in Toronto wanted a custom mural. She painted each one like it was her last statement on the matter. But it wasn't. The emotions kept arriving. She painted for what felt like days without sleeping, without music. Just candlelight, winter air, and the occasional voice in her head whispering, "You really left." She did, and she wouldn't go back. Still, there were moments. In line at the grocery store, seeing his favorite cereal, passing a man in a navy coat who moved like Cale, sitting alone at a cafe where they once shared a plate of pancakes and a dream. But none of those moments made her reach for her phone. Because healing wasn't about pretending it didn't hurt. It was about knowing what not to reopen. One Sunday, while prepping for a workshop at the community center, her phone buzzed. Unknown number, voicemail left. She debated, then pressed play. His voice, clear, calm, still trying to sound in control. "Hey, I know you don't owe me anything, but I've been thinking, if you ever want to talk, really talk, I'd like that. Not to fix anything, just to be human. I miss your voice, that's all." She didn't reply, but she did pause. Not because she missed him, but because she missed the version of herself who once believed his voice could fix anything. That Thursday, she found herself outside the Astor building. She wasn't there for him. She was meeting a collector who requested to see her early works. He suggested a cafe nearby, and she walked past the glass giant with his name on it without stopping. But she felt it. That tug, not regret. Recognition. The kind you feel when walking past a house you once lived in. Still standing, but no longer yours. Back in his penthouse, Cale was spiraling in quiet. Neve had been gone for weeks. She said she had a campaign in LA. She never confirmed if she was coming back. He didn't ask. He had become a man who built towers but couldn't maintain a living room. The board was happy with numbers, but behind closed doors they were whispering about his distracted nature. Missed cues, soft closes, passive strategies. He felt it too. His world, once sharp and scalable, now blurred at the edges. He tried dating again. For appearances, for headlines, because no one knew how to sit in silence with him and still feel connected. No one except Anera. And she wasn't looking back. One night, he showed up at her new art show unannounced. It wasn't a grand event. Small gallery, soft jazz, people with quiet eyes and full notebooks. She saw him from across the room. He didn't make a scene, didn't come close. He stood near the wall, studying her piece titled Hollow Luxury. It was a collage of sharp angles, skyscrapers made of torn gold paper, and a woman painted entirely. In grayscale, standing at the base, back turned, hair in a knot, suitcase at her feet. He didn't need a label to understand it. He stood there for 15 minutes, then left. She didn't follow, didn't speak, didn't write about it the next day. But she remembered, because some chapters don't close with door slams or shouted curses. Some close in quiet rooms, under soft lights, with unfinished conversations hanging in the air. And a woman standing tall while the man she once loved learns, far too late, that dignity cannot be negotiated. Anera didn't need noise to feel alive. The soft scratch of her brush against canvas, the warm chatter of children at the art center, the whistle of wind slipping through a cracked window. These were the sounds she trusted. Her mornings began with tea and silence. No phone calls, no tabloids, no assistants. Just her and the blank canvas waiting to be filled. She no longer checked her messages before breakfast. She no longer waited for the sound of footsteps at the door. She no longer kept track of dates tied to someone else's business trips. That part of her life was over. What she had now was hers. Her apartment was still modest, but each day it transformed. Anera painted the front door pale green, her favorite color. She bought a second-hand easel that leaned to one side, but held firm. On the living room wall she hung one painting, Beginning Again. It was mostly white space, interrupted by one curved line of blue that never touched the edges. It was the first thing she'd created after walking away from Cale. It was the moment her hands remembered their purpose. She sold her other works, but she kept that one. Not because it was her best, but because it was honest. Word of mouth did what marketing never could. One client led to another. A photographer asked to feature her in a blog. A retired doctor requested a commission for her meditation room. A nurse mailed her a letter with tears smeared across the ink, thanking her for painting emotions that couldn't be explained. Anera didn't reply to every message, but she read them all. And for the first time in years, her inbox wasn't full of logistics or damage control. It was full of connection, of strangers who saw her not as Cale Astor's wife, but as an artist with something to say. The community art center offered her more hours. "You've become something of a legend around here," the director said with a warm smile. "You walk in and everyone straightens up like you're royalty." Anera laughed. Royalty in paint-stained jeans, but she accepted the hours, not for the money, for the rhythm, for the children who needed a place to color without permission, for the teenagers who asked shyly if she could teach them how to blend pain into art. She never said no. She knew what it meant to feel voiceless. Now, she handed out brushes like they were microphones. One evening, after locking up the center, she stood on the sidewalk watching the street lamps flicker on. The light touched her face gently. Behind her, someone approached. She didn't have to turn to know who it was. She could smell the cologne, sharp and expensive. Cale. He stopped a few feet away, hands in his coat pockets. I was nearby. She didn't respond. I saw the kids through the window. "You're still good with them." Still, as if it was something temporary. "I heard you've got another exhibition coming." She nodded. "Next month." He stepped closer. "I won't stay long. I just wanted to say, you're doing well." Her voice was even. That was never in question. He looked down, half smiling. "I guess not." They stood there in silence. Two people who once shared dreams, now unable to share a sidewalk. After a moment she said, "You didn't come to check on me. You came to see if I was struggling." He looked up, startled. "You came to see if you made a mistake." He didn't deny it. "I did make a mistake," he said quietly. "I just didn't expect you to rise this way." "I did." Another beat. "Is there anything you need?" he asked. She met his eyes. "Yes. Space." He nodded. "Take care, Anera." She didn't answer. She turned and walked away. Not fast. Not angry. Just certain. And he didn't follow. This time, he knew better. Anera didn't tell anyone what it felt like to breathe without weight. Not because she couldn't. Because she didn't need to. The peace she lived in now didn't need to be explained. It simply existed. Like morning light slipping through curtains. Like quiet footsteps on hardwood floors. She woke up with no alarms. No meetings. No expectation to smile at parties she didn't want to attend. No wardrobe of polished silence to wear for society's approval. She painted in socks. She listened to birds. She cooked for herself without rushing. And for the first time in 5 years, she tasted the food she made. She didn't need luxury to feel full. She needed honesty. Her online gallery grew. People who had never heard of her began to follow her work. They didn't care about Cale. They didn't ask about her marriage. They asked about color, about line, about motion. "Your painting held my breath too long," What emotion were you in? Was softer without you, inspired by loss or freedom? Do you ever plan to write a book? She answered when she wanted. She ignored when she needed. She learned that peace required boundaries too, especially when the world kept poking at old scars for entertainment. One afternoon, a local podcast host invited her for a recording. The topic? Choosing yourself. She declined. She wasn't interested in becoming a symbol. She didn't want to be admired for leaving a man. She wanted to be understood for building herself after he stopped seeing her. There was a difference. So instead of taking a microphone, she picked up her brush and created Weightless, a massive piece done entirely in silver, grey and soft pink. It didn't scream. It breathed. She didn't list it for sale. She hung it above her bed. Her friends, true ones, visited more often now. They didn't ask what happened. They brought lemon tarts, candles, old records. They sat with her on the floor and flipped through old sketchbooks. They laughed at doodles she'd once made on the back of unpaid bills. "You've always been brilliant," one of them said. "I forgot for a while," Anera replied. "But now?" her friend asked. "Now," she smiled. "I remember." Neve's face popped up in an online headline a few weeks later. A gala in Paris. Cale by her side. Neve wore something gold. Cale wore that same tailored confidence. The article praised their power couple status. Anera didn't click the link. She simply turned off her phone, opened the window, and started painting again. She wasn't angry. She wasn't broken. She was done. One night, after finishing a new piece called "Didn't Raise My Voice," she stared at it for hours. It was bold, sharp, silent, and it held everything she hadn't said to him. She decided to post it without a caption. The comments poured in, not about Cale, not about gossip, but about strength, stillness, sovereignty. One woman wrote, "I left a 10-year relationship last spring. Your art helped me sleep at night. It reminded me that silence isn't weakness, it's clarity." Anera stared at the comment, then shut her laptop. She went to bed early. For the first time in years, she slept 8 hours without waking once. The next morning, the sun hit her floor like a soft promise. She made breakfast, washed her face, tied her hair, then walked to the community center with fresh paint and an armful of blank paper for the kids. Before she opened the door, she paused, took one deep breath, and smiled, because this wasn't survival anymore. This was her life, and she wasn't walking away anymore. She was walking forward. At first, the world didn't notice she was gone. No press release, no scandal, no messy headlines. Cale continued showing up to events. Neve appeared beside him, flawless and poised, her presence unchallenged by the absence of Anera. But absence, when intentional, becomes presence. Photos were cropped tighter. Paparazzi whispered. Editors started asking, where was Anera Hale Astor? She wasn't on social media. She wasn't at his side. She wasn't issuing statements. She was gone. And that silence unnerved them more than any angry outburst ever could. Cale's PR team scrambled. She's going to the press, isn't she? She'll talk eventually. She'll tell her side. But she didn't. And that was the story. A quiet disappearance. No lawsuits. No accusations. No need to burn him publicly. She'd simply left. And people started to notice. It began with a single tweet. Say what you want, but the woman who leaves with no drama, no dirt and no dime, that's power. Tens of thousands of retweets. Then came the TikToks. Clips of her artwork over soft music, stitched with quotes from the viral article, The Billionaire's Wife Who Walked. Comment sections flooded with women saying things like, "This is the kind of strength I want." She didn't clap back. She just built a new life. My mom left like this. I understand her silence now. It wasn't a brand. It was a movement. Anera watched from a distance. She didn't ask for any of it. She didn't read the threads, but her inbox filled up anyway. Requests for interviews. Collaborations. Would you like to write a book? Can we fly you out to speak at our conference? She ignored most. She wasn't performing healing. She was living it. But one message stuck. From a non-profit founder in Chicago: "We help women rebuild after domestic betrayal. Some of our clients found your work and said it helped them more than therapy. If nothing else, I just wanted to thank you for creating from truth." She read that message twice, then closed her laptop and cried, for the first time in weeks. Not because she was sad, because for once, her pain had given someone else permission to stop shrinking. Meanwhile, Cale felt the shift. The headlines changed. He still signed deals, still smiled in press photos, still held Neve's waist like she was a trophy. But he noticed the difference. Fewer journalists asked about his new towers. More asked where Anera had gone. At a board dinner, a foreign investor leaned in and said, "Your wife." She was quite composed. "I hear she's an artist now." "She always was," Cale replied, and the man just nodded. "Yes." But now people are finally seeing it. That night, Cale sat alone in his home office. No Neve, no staff, no meetings. Just a screen showing a recent interview with an art curator discussing Anera's newest collection. "She doesn't do interviews," the curator said. "She doesn't need to. Her work speaks." And Cale saw the gallery wall behind the man. 3 large paintings, one titled, "When Silence Isn't Weakness," another called, "I Was Never Missing, I Was Misdirected," and the last, "I Don't Hate You, I'm Just Done." He leaned forward, elbows on the desk, heart thudding softly. These weren't attacks. These were her truths. Painted, framed, displayed, and they were no longer his to understand. They were the world's now, and he had no claim. Anera spent her days as she pleased. Morning walks, midday paints, evening classes, tea before bed. Her students grew bolder. A 10-year-old named Kerry painted a picture of 2 houses, one broken, one blooming. "Who's this?" Anera asked gently. Kerry said, "The second one's my mom. After she left my dad." Anera blinked. Kerry grinned. "I think you and my mom would be friends." "Maybe we already are," Anera whispered. She tucked Kerry's painting into her portfolio after class. It reminded her that leaving quietly didn't mean disappearing. It meant reappearing somewhere better, somewhere whole. Cale didn't realize how much the world watched Anera until she stopped being in it. Not his world. The events, the investors, the magazine shoots. That part moved on quickly. But the real world, the one that lived in conversations, in small acts of courage, in women who whispered truth to each other, that world hadn't forgotten her. It had crowned her, not as a queen, but as a mirror. Neve began to notice too. She saw it in the subtle shifts at events, where once she was photographed alone or arm in arm with Cale. Now journalists angled for commentary on the missing wife. Even when they didn't say her name, they asked questions that circled around her. Neve smiled through it all, but in the back of her mind, she knew. Anera hadn't spoken a word, and yet her silence was louder than any of their press runs. One night, at a high-profile charity gala, Cale stood beside Neve as camera flashes went off. She wore emerald. He wore black. Everything about them screamed luxury. But as they posed, one reporter slipped in a question Cale didn't expect. "Mr. Astor, has your wife commented on the new project in Dubai?" Cale hesitated. "We're no longer. She's not involved in company operations." The reporter didn't back off. "Still, her name comes up often with your earlier designs. Any thoughts on her recent rise in the art world?" Cale's jaw tightened. She's always been talented. Nev reached for his hand, but it stayed at his side. The cameras clicked, but that was the shot that made headlines the next day. Billionaire silent as wife's shadow grows bigger than his tower. Back in Brooklyn, Anera skimmed the headline without clicking the article. She didn't need to read it. She already knew what it said. Instead, she opened a letter from a woman in Detroit. "You reminded me that I don't need to scream to be free. I walked away from a man who was emotionally generous to everyone but me. And for once, I didn't ask for permission. Another woman wrote, "I showed your gallery page to my teenage daughter. She said, she looks like someone who doesn't explain herself anymore. That's who I want to become." Anera didn't respond with words. She responded with unshaken, a dark blue, almost stormy painting with one bold white streak down the middle, clean, vertical, unmoved. It sold before she could post it on her main page. She started a small side project, a mentorship group for women artists. Nothing public, nothing branded, just a few women in a room every Thursday night. They didn't talk about men. They talked about visibility, about creating without apology, about finding meaning in mess. One night, someone asked, "What made you leave? What was the last straw?" Anera looked at her palette. "It wasn't one thing," she said. "It was all the little moments I let slide until they piled up and blocked the light." The room fell quiet. Then a voice said softly, "And now?" Anera smiled. "Now I paint with the windows open." Cale kept her old canvas, the one she left behind. He'd moved it from the living room to the study. Sometimes, late at night, he'd stare at it. 2 circles, drifting, not touching. He still didn't understand how something so simple could feel so final. And that's why she'd never come back. Because she didn't owe him understanding. She'd already given him the best of her, and he tried to split it in 2, but she didn't share herself anymore. She simply existed, whole, and far beyond his reach. Have you ever watched someone leave without burning the bridge, yet you knew they'd never walk back across it? Have you ever chosen silence over drama and found peace waiting on the other side? Has your absence ever spoken louder than your presence? If this story made you reflect, even a little, click the like button. Comment below what dignity means to you, and subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories for more powerful journeys like Anera's, where quiet doesn't mean weak, and walking away isn't the end, but the beginning. Neve had spent her entire adult life mastering the art of being seen. She knew how to angle her face toward the flash, how to soften her voice during interviews, how to walk into a room full of men and make every one of them look twice. She didn't need validation. She was validation. That's what she told herself, until the whispers started, not about her, about Anera. They never said it to her face, but she heard it in how people spoke to Cale. Polite, reserved, curious, but always laced with the unspoken question, why isn't Anera here? The first time it really hit her, they were at a formal dinner hosted by one of Cale's international partners. Neve wore silver, a show-stopping gown, her makeup flawless. As they were seated, the wife of a Turkish real estate developer leaned across the table and smiled at her. "You're lovely," she said, "but I must say, I admired your wife's quiet presence. She had grace." Cale smiled stiffly. "Anera's doing well. She's focused on her work." The woman nodded. She always seemed to make space without taking over the room, a rare skill. Neve excused herself halfway through the second course. She said it was a headache, but it was envy, not of Anera's position, of her peace. Back at their hotel suite, she sat in front of the mirror, wiping off her lipstick slowly. Cale walked in, loosened his tie, and tossed his jacket on a chair. "She didn't mean anything by it," he said. Neve shrugged. "They always do." He poured a drink. "People miss what they're used to." "No, Cale," she said, standing. "They miss what was real." He didn't respond. She watched him in the mirror, her voice low. "When we're alone, do you ever miss her?" He met her eyes, then looked away. That was answer enough. The truth settled into Neve's bones in tiny, sharp pieces. It wasn't that Cale didn't care for her. It was that he had never looked at her the way he used to look at Anera. Not with awe, not with comfort, not even with curiosity. With Neve, everything felt curated. Dinner reservations, outfit consultations, poses for the camera, planned statements. With Anera, there had been nothing to curate. She simply was, and that comparison became unbearable. Neve tried harder. She started wearing muted colors, speaking more softly, asking about his work with real interest, studying his past interviews to mimic his old rhythms. One afternoon, She suggested they host a charity auction for an arts program. He looked up from his laptop. Anera used to run something like that, he said. Nave smiled. That's the point. People liked her. This will remind them we're connected. He didn't answer, but he didn't say no, and that was enough for her to start planning. The gala was scheduled for late March. Black tie, private venue, exclusive list. The day of, Nev spent 4 hours getting ready. The dress was elegant, the hair understated. She even wore a single charm bracelet, just like Anera used to wear. She looked perfect, but as she stepped onto the red carpet beside Cale, something in her chest felt tight. It wasn't nerves. It was knowing that the woman she was trying to emulate had never once needed to try. And still, she had owned every room she entered. Not by power, by presence. Inside, the cameras flashed. Guests clapped. Auction items were displayed along the walls. In the far right corner, a painting caught her eye. She froze. It was hers. Well, Anera's. One of the gallery curators had donated a limited edition print of Anera's piece, Departure Isn't Desertion. The title card didn't say Cale Astor's wife. It said, simply, Anera Hale. Neve stared at the strokes. Soft earth tones. One faint silhouette walking away, the background warm, not bitter. And underneath, a bid already listed for $6,200. Cale appeared beside her. He followed her gaze. She donated anonymously, he said. Nev kept her expression still. You spoke to her? No. But you know she did. I know her style, he said. And her silence, Neve smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. For the first time in months, she realized, he may have chosen her publicly. But in every private space, he still belonged to the one who left. Neve didn't speak during the car ride home. The gala was over. The cameras had stopped. The applause had faded, but her thoughts were still loud. Cale sat beside her in silence, scrolling through emails on his phone, his face lit by the screen. She glanced at him, hoping for a word, a gesture, anything that would tether them back to something real. Nothing came. He didn't notice the way she was staring. Or maybe he did and didn't care. Back at the penthouse, he went straight to his office. She walked into the guest room, her room now. That had become the quiet agreement between them. She wasn't the woman he brought to bed. She was the one he brought to events, and it was starting to rot her from the inside. The next morning, she tried to bring it up over coffee. You know the print of Anera's painting at the gala? She asked, watching his face. He nodded, not looking up from his screen. She donated it anonymously, you said. He paused. Yes, she's still in your orbit, even when she doesn't want to be. She didn't ask for the spotlight. No, she just commands it. He finally looked up. What do you want me to say, Neve? I want to know if I'm standing next to a man who's still in love with his wife. His eyes narrowed. You knew what this was when it started. I thought I did. Neve pushed her chair back and stood. You said you wanted balance. That she was the calm and I was the fire. But what you really meant was, she was home and I was the hotel. He didn't speak. Because there was nothing he could say that wouldn't confirm it. The next few weeks brought more distance. Cale became consumed with work again. His calendar was packed. His face reappeared on magazine covers. And, Neve? She shrank. Not publicly, but internally. She found herself opening Anera's gallery page late at night, studying the lines, the texture, the emotion, searching for what made her presence feel so permanent. She started painting again, something she hadn't done since college. Secretly, terribly. But still, she painted. One night, she left one of her canvases leaning against the bedroom wall. Cale walked in, glanced at it and asked, Where did you buy this? She looked up slowly. I didn't. I made it. He blinked. Oh. Then walked away. That was all. Not a compliment. Not a question. Just, oh. She stared at the canvas for a long time after that, then turned it to face the wall. At a press dinner a few nights later, someone asked about Anera again. A reporter leaned over his notebook and said, It's incredible how quiet she's been. No interviews, no tell-alls. She just moved on. Cale smiled faintly. That's who she is. Neve noticed the shift in his tone. Admiration. Still, always. Later that night, she told him she was flying to LA for a solo trip. He didn't ask why. He didn't ask when she'd be back. He simply nodded, and she packed light. Because deep down, she knew she wouldn't return. Not because she couldn't compete with Anera, but because she was tired of trying to, tired of chasing a ghost, tired of being a performance beside a memory. And even though she had arrived with ambition, she would leave with truth. Cale never loved her. He only loved being loved by her. And now, he had neither. Not from Neve, and certainly not from Anera. Anera never planned to lead anything. She wasn't chasing platforms or accolades. She didn't need applause. She simply wanted space to create, and to give others that same gift. But word spread faster than she could control. The small mentorship group she started with 5 women grew into 15. Then 20. Then the center director cleared the upstairs storage room to make space for more. Every Thursday evening, Anera sat on a low stool in a paint-stained smock while a circle of women shared their work, their doubts, their quiet stories of becoming. It wasn't therapy. It was recognition. One woman, Kalina, had walked away from a 7-year marriage with only her keys and her journal. Another, Suri, had never touched a paintbrush before joining the group. But now her sketches were raw with color and courage. They didn't speak about men much. Not out of fear, but freedom. This wasn't about what they left behind. It was about what they were building now. One night, Kalina brought a canvas titled Uninvited Weight. It was a black shape in the middle of white space. Not perfect, not technical, but it held grief like a confession. Anera didn't critique it. She stood in front of it, arms folded, then simply said, "Where do you feel this in your body?" Kalina blinked. "My chest," she whispered. "Good," Anera said. "Then let it go. Paint the shape it turns into after it leaves." Kalina started crying. No one spoke. Someone handed her a brush, and the night went on. The group became a safe room in a city that moved too fast. They didn't always paint. Sometimes they sat in silence. Sometimes they danced. Sometimes they ripped old canvases to start again. Anera never called herself a leader. She never stood at the front, but when she missed one Thursday for a gallery meeting, everyone noticed. "You centered us," one woman said, "without trying to, without taking anything." Anera smiled softly. "I've had enough taken from me. This space gives back." Her gallery show approached quickly. Unlike before, she didn't hide behind others. Her name, Anera Hale, was listed at the top of the flyer. Not because she asked, but because she earned it. The theme was simple, becoming. 12 original pieces. Each one born from quiet pain and steady healing. Each one titled after something she'd felt in the silence. "I chose me anyway. Let the light back in. He didn't break me, he delayed me." The night of the show, the gallery was full before the doors even opened. Bloggers, buyers, artists, students, therapists, people who didn't know her story, but knew how it felt, and people who knew it too well. As the show began, Anera stood quietly in the back. She didn't need to explain anything. The work did that for her. Still, a young woman approached and asked, "How do you know what to say without saying it?" Anera replied, "I stopped painting to be understood. I started painting to understand myself." The woman nodded like she'd been waiting years to hear those exact words, then walked away, and Anera exhaled, because she wasn't the only one who needed this space. She was just the first to name it. Anera stayed until the very end of her gallery show, not out of obligation, but because she wanted to feel every second of it, every stranger's breath caught in their throat, every whispered wow, every quiet moment of resonance when someone stared at her work and saw themselves. This was what rebuilding looked like, not an empire of revenge, not a monument to her pain, but a soft, firm declaration. "I'm still here, and I am better After the show, she walked home under the New York sky. No limo, no driver, no heels, just boots, a warm coat, and the cold air stinging her cheeks. She passed by one of Cale's towers on the way. Glass shining, doormen stiff with posture, people walking in and out with too much perfume and not enough soul. She didn't pause. She didn't look up. She just walked, because she was no longer impressed by what he built. She was proud of what she survived, and what she now created. 2 days later, a letter arrived at the gallery. It was handwritten, in pen so soft it nearly faded off the paper. No signature, just a message. I don't recognize myself anymore. You helped me remember. I bought Let the Light Back In, not because I'm there, but because I want to be. Anera folded the letter carefully and slid it into a notebook filled with sketches and phrases she wasn't ready to say aloud yet. She didn't need to reply. She had already spoken, on canvas, in color, through every brushstroke that said, "You don't have to scream to be heard." A few weeks later, the community center held an open mic night. It was a small event. No fanfare. Just mismatched chairs, cheap string lights, and a worn-out mic held together with tape. Kalina stood up first. She read a poem titled, "I Left Quietly But My Absence Roared." Suri shared a charcoal drawing of a girl sitting at a kitchen table alone, with a crown made of cracked glass. Each piece felt like an echo of Anera's story, but not a copy, an evolution. They weren't following her. They were following themselves. Anera clapped the loudest, because she knew what it took to stand in the light after being trained to survive in the shadows. That night, after the room had emptied and the chairs were stacked, one of the younger girls, barely 16, approached her. "I don't know if I belong here," she said. "I've never been in a relationship. I've never lost anything." Anera smiled gently. "You don't have to break to start over." The girl looked confused. "Then what am I doing here?" "You're learning to stay whole." She nodded slowly. And for the first time in the girl's life, someone gave her permission to grow without needing to shatter first. Later that week, Anera was featured in a small but respected independent magazine. The title was simple, Anera Hale. Stillness as strength. She didn't do a photo shoot. She didn't give quotes. The article was written entirely from observation and reviews from gallery guests. It said, "Some artists speak through chaos. Anera Hale speaks through restraint. Her work is what happens when a woman refuses to explain herself to those who never listened in the first place." When Cale read it, he didn't finish the second paragraph. He closed the magazine and stared out the window of his office. The skyline stretched before him, full of towers with his name on them. But none of those towers had ever made someone feel the way her silence did. He built structures, she built stillness, and hers would outlast his. Anera didn't hear about the article until someone left a copy on her desk at the center. She read it once, then slid it into her drawer beneath the thank you letters, the dried flowers, and the photo of her standing beside her students, paint on her cheek, joy in her eyes. She wasn't trying to be remembered. She was finally living. And that was enough. Cale Astor had it all. At least, that's what the world still believed. His calendar was full. His deals were lucrative. His last 3 buildings sold out before the glass dried on the upper floors. His name still moved money, but none of it settled him anymore. He read headlines about himself like a stranger. He spoke in interviews like someone reading off a cue card. He went home to silence, and when silence came, so did memory. At first he thought she would return. Not right away, not loudly, but maybe with a message, a forwarded article, a memory sent at midnight. Something. But weeks passed, then months, and not once did Anera reach out. No breadcrumbs, no clues, no open windows. She had closed the door, and unlike others before her, she had locked it without turning bitter. That was what stung most. She hadn't needed to make him the villain. She had just stopped needing him. He started following her online anonymously. He didn't use his main account. He created a new one, empty bio, no profile photo, just to see her paintings, to see the captions. the titles, the growing audience that clung to her quiet like it was salvation. He watched as she built something without him, something pure, something unshakable. She posted a piece called "Don't Wait for Closure," a muted color field with a single vertical gold streak. The caption read, "Some endings don't come with a goodbye. Some peace comes from walking away before you're pushed." He knew that was about him, but she hadn't tagged him. She never needed to. She just kept creating. His team noticed the change. He missed meetings. He let opportunities slide. His signature became delayed on deals that once excited him. Neve had already left, silently, with a 3-line email and no forwarding address. His assistant asked once carefully, "Sir, should I move the canvas in your study?" He shook his head. "Leave it." The one she left behind still hung there, 2 circles drifting apart. He stared at it nightly, looking for answers he never earned. One afternoon, he stood at the top of his newest tower. The wind cut hard against his coat, the city sprawling below. He used to look out and feel powerful. Now, all he saw were empty windows, other people's homes, other people's lights. None of them were hers. He'd made skylines bend to his will, but couldn't build a life worth staying in. That same week, a client from London flew in to tour a penthouse unit. Cale gave the tour himself. The man was impressed by the detail, the marble, the layout. Then he paused by a large window and asked casually, "Didn't your wife help design some of your early interiors?" Cale cleared his throat. "Yes." "Anera had a brilliant eye." The man nodded. "It shows. These new ones feel colder." The comment wasn't meant to wound, but it did, because Cale knew. She wasn't just decoration. She was warmth. She was restraint. She was the reason their empire had once felt like a home. And now, he was standing in a kingdom of concrete, wondering why nothing echoed back. Later that night, he scrolled through her gallery page again. She had posted a painting titled, "You Don't Get to Know Me Now." It was stark. 3 colors. 1 message. He stared at it for almost 20 minutes, then shut the laptop, and for the first time in a long time, sat still. No calls, no meetings, no wine, just silence, the kind he used to run from. And now, the only thing he could feel. Cale didn't attend another event for weeks. His calendar remained full, but he began cancelling quietly. A conference in Dubai, a summit in Berlin, a black tie auction he was supposed to host. He declined all of them. He told his assistant he was refocusing, but the truth was simpler. He didn't know how to walk into rooms where Anera's silence echoed louder than applause. One day, while reorganizing old files in his home office, he found a notebook, worn, leather-bound, tucked beneath a stack of old blueprints. Anera's. He recognized her handwriting immediately, neat, tilted, slightly right. Inside were sketches of gallery layouts, color tests, quotes scribbled in the margins. One page stopped him. "If I ever have to choose between being seen or being safe, I'll choose neither. I'll choose to be free." It wasn't dated, but he remembered when she wrote it. They'd been on the rooftop of their first apartment, sitting cross-legged on a blanket, eating cold pizza. He had been venting about a client who wanted flashover function. Anera had said nothing at the time. She just wrote that line down and tucked it away, and now, years later, her freedom was the only thing he couldn't touch. He tried reaching out once. An unsigned letter, hand-delivered to her gallery. "I don't want forgiveness. I just want you to know I see it now. All of it. And I was wrong." He never got a response. He didn't expect one. But a week later, a new piece appeared in her online collection. No return address. A canvas layered with soft blue, almost like sky, but interrupted by black brushstrokes that looked like walls. It sold within hours. He didn't buy it. He couldn't. She had built something he no longer had access to, and that was what made it beautiful. The board called a meeting soon after. There were concerns. "Your name still has weight," one director said, "but the numbers are shifting. The press sees a story you don't want them to, He nodded, said all the right things, promised to step back in with full energy. But the truth was, he had lost interest in being impressive. He used to build towers to prove himself. Now even he knew the tallest buildings couldn't anchor an unsteady man. He excused himself from the meeting early. He sat alone in his car for over an hour, and when he finally looked up, he realized where he had parked, in front of the old community center, the one where Anera still taught. He didn't go inside. He watched as women exited the doors, smiling, carrying sketchbooks, laughing, and just as he turned to leave, he saw her. Across the street, talking to someone, hands moving as she explained something about a painting. She looked radiant. Not because she was dressed up, she wasn't. Not because she saw him, she didn't. But because she was alive in a way she never was when she stood next to him. And for the first time in his life, Cale understood what it meant to watch someone bloom. While knowing you were the season they had to survive to get there, the invitation was mailed in a plain cream envelope. No fanfare, no gold foil, no mention of names. Just a simple card. Anera Hale, new works. One night only. Attendance by registration only. Cale received it a week before the event. He stared at it for a long time. He knew it wasn't meant for him. He hadn't been invited. But the address was public. The time was listed. And there was nothing. No legal wall, no bouncer, that could keep him out. Only conscience. And his was too heavy to move. The night of the exhibition, the gallery glowed from the inside like it had a heartbeat. The space was modest, no sprawling estate, no rooftop cocktails, but every guest walked in with purpose. Art students, critics, journalists, survivors, no red carpet, no flashbulbs, just anticipation. Each painting stood alone, bold, clean, named with precision. Don't shrink for love. Peace didn't beg me to stay. You'll think of me when it's quiet. The room moved slowly, almost reverently. No one whispered gossip. They stared, thought, and walked softly. Anera entered through the back door just 10 minutes before the event started. She wore a simple navy dress and flat shoes. Her hair was pulled into a low bun. No jewelry. No makeup beyond bare skin and steady eyes. The only adornment was her calm. She greeted the gallery owner, hugged 2 former students, then stood in the corner, quiet but not hidden. She didn't need to command attention. She was the art. Cale walked in 30 minutes later, alone. No cameras followed. He wore a charcoal suit and left his usual confidence in the car. He stood near the entrance for a full minute, unsure if he belonged. Then, without asking, he entered the gallery and moved slowly between the pieces. Nobody greeted him. No one asked for photos. Some recognized him, but no one interrupted the space Anera had built. It wasn't his domain anymore. He stopped in front of the one who left with nothing. Grey background, 1 black chair, a shadow leaning against a window with no visible face. No title card mentioned him, but he knew. This one was about the day she left. About the suitcase, the canvas, the door that clicked shut behind her. He stepped closer, and behind him, the room quieted just a little. Not out of reverence, out of recognition. They knew he was the man who made this possible, not by lifting her, but by refusing to. And she had risen anyway. Then he saw it, the final piece, centered at the far wall, bigger than the rest, more space around it than any other. The plaque beside it read only "Unshared Skies." It was unlike her other work. More open, softer edges, hints of warmth beneath muted gold. At first it seemed gentle, but the longer he stared, the more he realized this was her goodbye. Not the angry kind, not bitter, just final. A goodbye without hate, without drama. A goodbye that didn't ask to be remembered, only respected. He stood there for a long time, and he wasn't alone. Other people stood behind him, watching the same painting. No one spoke, because some things don't need explanation, they only need space. And Anera had claimed hers completely. Anera stood across the room from Cale, not close, not hidden, just separate. She saw him. She didn't look away. She didn't smile. She didn't move toward him. Because this wasn't his moment. It was hers. And he was just a visitor now. A woman approached Anera quietly. Young, early 20s maybe. She held a small notebook and looked nervous. "Miss Hale, do you have a minute?" Anera turned toward her with a gentle nod. "Of course." The girl glanced toward unshared skies. "Did someone break your heart?" Anera followed her gaze to the painting. Her expression softened. "No," she replied. "He gave it back, so I could use it fully." The girl's eyes glistened. She didn't ask more. She wrote the answer down in her notebook and said, "Thank you," then walked away slowly, like the weight in her chest had lifted a little. Cale heard it all, every word, but she hadn't spoken it to him. She hadn't even acknowledged he was there, and that, more than anything, told him the truth. She had healed in places he hadn't even started to touch. People began to leave over the next hour. Some stopped to thank Anera. Others left donations for the community center. A few slipped handwritten notes into the guest book. She didn't perform for anyone. She didn't explain her pieces. She let the silence between colors say what needed to be said. When the last cluster of guests moved toward the exit, she remained still, speaking with the gallery owner about scheduling pickups and press releases. Cale lingered by the door, unsure if he should speak. He finally stepped forward, slow and quiet. "Anera." She turned, and for the first time in a long time, looked him in the eye. Cale, just his name. Calm, even, no warmth, no venom, just recognition and a firm boundary. He hesitated. "It's beautiful." She nodded once. "Thank you. I saw," he gestured toward unshared skies, "everything. I know. I wanted to say something, but it feels like nothing I say would matter anymore." She met his eyes fully. "You're right." He looked down. "I didn't come to disrupt this. I know. I just needed to see it. I understand." More silence. Then he said, "You look like yourself again." A soft smile touched her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I found her. She was never gone. She was just waiting for me to choose her." He nodded. No excuses, no defense. He finally understood he'd been dismissed long before she left. As he turned to go, he stopped one last time. "There was a time when I thought you needed me." She tilted her head. "There was a time I thought that too." Then she turned and walked toward her painting, back into her piece, while Cale walked out of the gallery and into the cold night, alone, not as punishment, but because some doors don't close loudly. Some simply stop opening. 6 months passed. The exhibition had come and gone. The gallery pieces sold out. Articles were written. Podcasts mentioned her name without dragging his. Requests continued to flood in, but Anera didn't chase the noise. She had no interest in becoming a celebrity. She didn't need to go viral to feel valuable. She simply kept living, teaching, painting, breathing. Her days fell into a rhythm she didn't want to change. Mornings started with stretches and green tea, her curtains drawn back to let the sun touch her plants. She watered them slowly, spoke to them like they were friends. It was a habit she picked up during her marriage, when loneliness crept in unnoticed. But now, the habit wasn't survival. It was intimacy with herself. By noon, she was either at the art center or in her home studio, painting with soft music in the background. Sometimes jazz, sometimes silence. She rarely looked at her phone, unless she had to. She'd muted almost every name that reminded her of the woman she used to be, not because she hated that version, but because she didn't need to return to her. That girl had done her job. She'd loved. She'd stayed. She'd given too much. And now, Anera, the woman, was giving back to herself. Her mentorship circle had expanded. A local non-profit offered her a small grant to formalize the group into a weekly Healing Through Art program. They called it Stillness Studio, not because it was silent, but because it held what others rushed past. The first class under the new name started with a simple prompt: Paint the moment you stopped apologizing. One woman painted a red dress on fire. Another painted a dinner table with only one fork. One teenager painted nothing. Just a white canvas with a faint line down the middle. Anera walked around slowly, nodding, letting her students lead themselves. Because she understood now, leadership wasn't about controlling the room. It was about creating space where others didn't feel the need to shrink. That afternoon, after the class ended, she sat with her sketchbook on the back steps of the center. A young man approached. Not a student, not a journalist, just a man in his mid-30s with careful eyes and a notebook. "Excuse me," he said. "I hope I'm not intruding." She looked up. "You're not. I just wanted to say thank you." She waited. "My sister was in your group. Kalina." Anera smiled. "Kalina is remarkable." "She is," he said, almost in awe. "But I hadn't seen her that strong in years. She credits you. I only gave her space." He nodded. "Still, I wanted you to know that what you're doing, it matters. Quietly, but deeply." She closed her sketchbook and stood. "Thank you for telling me that." He hesitated. "I'm a writer. I've been following your work from a distance. Would you ever consider doing a book?" She shook her head gently. "I'm still writing my life. Let me finish the page I'm on." He smiled. "Fair." Then he left. No card exchanged, no photo taken. Just truth, acknowledged between strangers. At home, Anera lit a candle and pulled out an unfinished piece from 2 months ago. It had been too raw to finish then. But now she could see the end of it clearly. She picked up her brush and began filling in the edges. She called it "Forgiveness Doesn't Need an Audience," because it didn't. She had forgiven Cale a long time ago. Not by calling him, not by letting him back in, but by living fully in the space he once occupied, and showing herself that she was enough, all along. No permission required. A month after Stillness Studio was officially recognized, Anera received a formal request to feature her work at a contemporary arts museum in Chicago. She didn't celebrate. She simply smiled and added the date to her calendar. It wasn't that she wasn't proud. She was, deeply. But pride, for her, had stopped being a performance. Now it was a posture, a way of living, a way of standing upright in a world that had once tried to shrink her. The curator's email ended with a line she read twice. "Your work speaks without anger. It teaches what healing can look like." She didn't reply right away. She didn't need to. That line stayed with her for days, because that had been the mission all along, even before she knew she had one. She spent the next few weeks quietly preparing for the Chicago show. No press, no teasers, no invitations to people from her past. Her circle was smaller now but more solid. On opening night, she stood in the corner of the gallery, just like always, observing, breathing. She noticed someone crying softly in front of. I left before I had to explain again. Another woman stood staring at, "Don't ask me if I'm angry, ask me why I'm quiet." Each title was a truth Anera had lived. Now they belonged to someone else who needed it. She no longer clung to her pain. She had given it purpose. Cale never reached out again. Not after the exhibition. Not after the interviews. Not even after the articles stopped. And that, finally, was right. She didn't hate him. She didn't wish him harm. She simply had nothing more to give him. He had taken enough. And now, what she created went to those who wouldn't try to split her into pieces. Only those who saw her as whole. One Sunday morning, Anera walked to the park with her sketchbook. She sat on her usual bench near the old oak tree, the one with initials carved into its bark by lovers who hoped forever was as easy as pressing wood. She had once believed that, too. Now, she didn't need forever from anyone. Only truth, only presence, only peace. She opened her sketchbook and began a new page. Soft, circular motions. Something warm, something alive. A shape beginning to emerge. A woman standing in a field, face lifted to the sky, hair blowing free. She titled it with pencil first, lightly above the page. She didn't wait to be chosen. Back at home, she placed it gently on her shelf beside the others. No need to hang it yet. Some art is meant to live close to the chest before the world ever sees it. Some art is a conversation between a woman and the part of her that stayed, that rose, that never begged, and never will. As the evening faded and the light dimmed in her studio, Anera brewed her tea, lit her candle, and sat at the window. Outside, the city moved, fast, loud, endless. Inside, it was still. She wrote one sentence in her journal before closing it for the night. He demanded 2 women. I became one who would never be split again. And with that, she smiled. Soft, small, certain. Because sometimes walking away doesn't mean you're done. It means you've finally arrived. You've just witnessed a woman walk away with nothing but her dignity and somehow end up with everything that mattered. Not the money, not the headlines, not the revenge, but peace, purpose, and the kind of strength that doesn't need to explain itself. So now I'll ask you, have you ever been expected to settle because it was easier for someone else? Have you ever kept quiet to protect someone who never protected you? Have you ever walked away, not to prove a point, but to save yourself? Anera didn't win because she fought. She won because she stopped participating in what diminished her. And if you've ever had to make that kind of choice, or you're standing at that edge right now, tell us in the comments, what did Anera's strength teach you about peace, pride, and walking away? Like this video if you believe silence can be power. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. And if you believe in choosing yourself without apology, hit that subscribe button, because here at Mr. Charles Stories, we tell the truth quietly, and it always hits. See you in the next one.